Would anyone in this world be surprised to learn that Maggie got home at 2 o'clock and that she's not even in trouble? Cinderella called around midnight and asked for an extension. But I found out a lot of stuff from Maggie today. I asked her about the party, and for once, she decided to talk to me, and she told me all about it. It was very fancy, she said, with butlers and maids. They had all kinds of little things to eat, like dips and mushrooms, and there was a live band that played outside on the patio, and everyone danced, and the neighbors didn't even complain. The thing that surprised me the most was when she said that Beth Ann was there. And then, after Maggie made me promise not to tell, she said that Beth Ann was hanging all over Derek the Divine, and that Derek was sort of a jerk. She said, he's just sort of gawky, and his eyes sort of bug out, so he always looks surprised. And he didn't say 2 words, just sort of followed Judy and what's his name around. And Beth Ann followed him around. Then out of the blue, Maggie said, "Oh, funny, I just remembered that there was some guy there who asked about you." Me? Somebody asked about me? Now, what was his name? He lives next door to Bill Ferguson, the guy who had the party. That's probably why he was there. I don't think he had a date, and I only saw him there at the beginning. You don't remember his name? Maggie never remembers names. It's exasperating. Describe him then, I said. Well, he's pretty cute. Sort of tallish and thinnish, blondish hair with pinkish skin. Alex? Was it Alex Cheevy? He lives in Norton, and he has this sort of pinkish... Alex! That's it! Yes, Alex. Alex Cheevy was at the party, and he asked about me. Well, sort of. And Beth Ann's truly divine, wonderful, gorgeous Derek is sort of a jerk. I felt a lot better today. Monday, June 25th. This is the first day of the new journal, but I'm not going to write much because I am so sleepy. I had to watch Tommy all afternoon, even though it was supposed to be Maggie's day. She traded Friday with me. But Mr. Furtz is sick. He came home early from the store, and Mrs. Furtz had to take him to the doctor. So Maggie had to go over there and stay with Kathy, Barry, and David. Mrs. Furtz didn't get home until 8, and she was all upset because the doctor said Mr. Furtz should go right into the hospital for some tests. Maggie's going to go over again tomorrow, so Mrs. Furtz can go to the hospital. The surprising thing is that Mr. Furtz looks like one of those real healthy types. He plays lots of golf and tennis, and is always running around in his gym shorts and tennis shoes. He's got these really long, skinny legs and great big feet. Mom says she bets he's home in a couple days, and these doctors are always scaring people with tests for every little thing. I don't much like doctors, because they never really listen to you. But I guess it must be hard to sit there and listen to people complain all day. I still haven't heard from Beth Ann, and I decided I wasn't going to call her. I'll wait till she wants to talk to me. Oh, I guess I better tell about Carl Ray. Dad had to call him about 1,000 times this morning to get him out of bed for his first day of work, but he finally did get up. Then at dinner, when Dad asked how his job was, Carl Ray said, And surprisingly, Dad didn't say, "Does that mean?" Instead, he said, "Well, good. I'm glad to hear it." I think he's getting sort of fed up with Carl Ray. Mom asked Carl Ray if someone took over for Mr. Furtz at the store while he was at the doctor's. And Carl Ray said, "Yup," but he never said who it was. When I was cleaning Carl Ray's room today, I put a can of deodorant on his dresser. Is that mean? Well, it was just supposed to be a hint. Good night. whoever you are out there. Tuesday, June 26th. Mr. Furts is still in the hospital. He had a bunch of tests, but no results yet, and he has to have some more tests tomorrow. Maggie said that Mrs. Furts is a wreck. I'm sure Mr. Furts will be home soon. No word from my best friend Beth Ann. Do you want to know how Carl Ray's job went today? Well, at dinner, when Mom asked him, he said, I examined the can of deodorant today, but I couldn't tell if it had been used. So I added a new bar of soap to his dresser top. Today, in the mail, we all got our summer reading lists for school. On it are about 1 million books for each grade, and you're supposed to read as many as possible, and then take notes. Tommy and I went to the library today. He picked out a bunch of easy reader books. He can't read yet, but he pretends. And a book on Eskimos. Eskimos, what? I checked out 2 on the list. The Odyssey and Poems of Robert Frost. I skimmed through the Odyssey and think perhaps I made a mistake getting this one. The print is so small. I hate that. And there's all these weird names in it. Maybe I'll try reading it tomorrow. I read a couple poems in the Robert Frost book. Some are okay, but some are very strange. Like the one in the front about a pasture. Someone is going out to the pasture and tells someone else to come along too. That's about it, really. I wrote a poem once about a lunchbox and a bologna, why is that word spelled like that? Sandwich. And I think even that was better than the one about the pasture. Wednesday, June 27th. The worst thing happened today. After dinner, Mom and I were in the kitchen. Maggie was still over at the Furtz's, and the phone rang. Mom answered it, and I heard her suck in her breath and say, "Oh no," and "How?" and "Oh, when?" I just knew it was some kind of bad news. When she hung up, she ran right upstairs calling, "Sam, Sam, Sam." My dad met her at the top of the stairs, and she said, "Oh, Sam, that new neighbor, Mr. Furts, he's dead." She told my dad that she had just talked to Maggie, who had just talked to Mrs. Furts, who was still at the hospital, and practically hysterical. So Maggie didn't find out too much, except that Mr. Furts had been resting after some tests, and he was supposed to come home tomorrow. Mrs. Furts was waiting out in the hall, while a nurse was doing something in there, and all of a sudden, this light started flashing over his door, and all these people started running in and out, and Mrs. Furts thought it was his roommate who was in trouble, because she had just seen her husband, and he was fine. Then a nurse asked Mrs. Furts to come down the hall with her, and they took her into a room, and 15 minutes later, they told her that Mr. Furts was dead. He had a gigantic heart attack or something. I just can't believe it. My mom and dad had only met Mr. Furts once, but they went right over to the Furtz's to wait for Mrs. Furts to come home. I keep wondering about Kathy and Barry and little David, who's Tommy's age, which is 4. What is their mother going to tell them? I don't feel like writing about other stuff just now because it doesn't seem right. It's scary that a person can be as healthy looking as Mr. Furts and then boom, all of a sudden, he isn't here anymore. I'm glad Mrs. Furts was visiting Mr. Furts just before it happened. Maybe she was holding his hand or something. I don't much like it, though, that Mrs. Furts wasn't in the room when all the lights started flashing. That's probably when Mr. Furts needed his wife the most. Maybe he wanted to tell her one last thing. And what about Mrs. Furts standing out there in the hallway, not expecting this to happen? And what about his children and his friends and neighbors who were just going along, doing the dishes and stuff? And then all of a sudden the telephone rings and you think it's going to be some regular person calling with some regular old chatter, and wham! It's the most awful news. And I also keep wondering about my mom and dad. They seem so healthy too. Please, please, please don't let anything happen to them.